Hi Vijay, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And this is such a fascinating topic or set of topics that you found. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, me too. And I'm glad that people like you are willing to chat with me on these things. So I hope people who are watching this will enjoy it.
I call myself a wanderer, a dabbler, a student, a seeker, a Sherpa, and a thriver. So, in a nutshell, this describes, I think, the person I am. I'm a leadership consultant and coach. I've been doing this now for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was in the advertising business and lived and worked all over the world, working for a major agency. And now my work is more in an advisory or at a board level kind of a capacity. But the domains of nature, culture, and self, these are three domains that I'm spending more and more time in as I'm approaching my own kind of sunset years professionally and career wise. And so, therefore, some of these kinds of topics I have read about and I have studied and I'm interested in.
We connected on the book that you wrote, which was My Cancer is Me. We were involved in the website and the app. What is God? What is your understanding of this concept?
Yeah, it's a great question and an interesting one to start with. So, I want to start with a little bit of a disclaimer, which is that I consider myself to be an open minded skeptic. And I've chosen those words carefully because in my own life journey, as you talked about, I've come across many different things which have immense possibilities. And so I'm open minded towards all of them. But there is also a skeptical side of me where I want to kick the tires and check that there is really some substance to all of this stuff that is coming at me. So I think that being an open minded skeptic for my sake, not for anybody else's sake, allows me to distinguish and discriminate between what makes sense to me and what doesn't make sense to me. To that extent, my philosophy around these kinds of topics is what Gautam Buddha recommended, which is to say that don't take anybody's word for it, trust your own experience. When he said don't take anybody's word for it, he also referred to himself. And the second thing he said is that doubt is a good thing. And this, in a way, flies against the general philosophy that everything stems from belief. And he also said that take what makes sense to you and leave the rest. So, in a way, my journey into this whole space of God, spirituality, soul, creator, etc., has been shaped by this kind of an approach. So, to come directly to your question, what is my understanding of God or the creator? The word I use is the divine. I think for me, that captures the ethos and the sense of what I take out of God or the creator. And for me, therefore, in my own work, coming out of cancer, and I reconnected very deeply with the whole spiritual side of myself. And I come from a very orthodox religious upbringing. And so there was a lot of ritual and orthodox religion around me when I grew up. And so naturally, I rebelled against it and I walked away from it. And then I came back to it actually after my cancer experience because I realized that I had disconnected myself from something very important. So, therefore, it's a long answer to a short question, which is that I call it the divine. For me, it's a very important part of me and it's a very important part of everything that is around me. It's also very personal and very subjective. And therefore, I keep it to myself as much as possible. And only when specifically asked, like right now, will I be open to talking about it. In general, conversations and so on, I generally don't venture an opinion. So, my view on it is that the small self and the divine self are one and the same. And so, in a way, I don't believe in just an internal divine or the immanent divine, as the Advaitics would call it. And I don't only believe in a transcendent divine, means outside of you, the God who lives in the sky, to whom we should worship and to whom we should beseech for gifts and grants and boons and all this stuff. So, this doesn't really sit well with me. The view that you are that which you seek, and therefore to be able to recognize the spark of the divine that is in me and the spark of the divine that is present in every bit of creation, that is magical enough for me without having to necessarily name or give a form or worship or any of those kinds of things. I don't really need that. I get my joys out of simply being in this connected space with what I describe as the divine.
Nice. Very nice. I loved it. You put it very well. And I like that one aspect, which is don't talk about it until specifically asked, because it is different for everybody and no point getting into these debates and dialogues about it. But that I like. Also, I like the fact that you said it's experience based. Like you cannot, there's no theory intellectualization about this to a certain point. And then at some point you have to, oh, I got an experience. So therefore it now I accept this to be true rather than just a belief, faith on something, which I like very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
So one of my teachers said that real faith requires no belief. And so as you correctly said, which I agree with, that when you have the experience, that's what turns belief into faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you have to wait for whatever experiences that a person has to go through to come to that. It is not something that can be, hey, read the book. It says so. There are two types of systems that people believe in. One is in biblical Quran or the Judaism. You get born, you die, and that's the end of it. You go either to heaven or hell. So you have to do everything now. Versus you die, you come back, there's karma, you have to check out the karma, you have to settle your debts. And so therefore there's this whole reincarnation soul journey that is immortal. And you keep coming back to finish your karma. What is your thoughts on the whole concept of soul, karma, rebirth, all of this? How do you see all of these together?
So one of the things about being an open-minded skeptic is that I describe myself as a possibilist, which is neither a believer nor a non-believer. I'm a possibilist. So if I don't have real substance to be able to say that reincarnation is true or not, my response is it's possible. Right? Similarly, if you look at, let's say, karma, from whatever I have read and studied and discussed with many people, the concept of cause and effect is indisputable. There are causes and there are effects. And to some extent, we also know that actions have consequences. We know this in our day-to-day life, right? So therefore, intuitively, I can feel that yes, the concept of karma is possibly true. Because some aspects of it I see in my real life. I don't need any theory or I don't need to meditate, for example, to get some of those aspects of karma. When we theorize that karma crosses lifetimes, now this is where I'm not very sure. This is where my skeptical mind says it's possible, but I can't be sure whether it is indeed true or not. And there is evidence on both sides. Right? So the concept of a soul, that there is something deeper to us than just the mind or the body. Again, that seems intuitively right because I know there is a part of Vijay Bhat that is perhaps deeper than mind or body. But whether that soul is immortal or eternal, and whether that soul basically changes clothes, and whether the changing of those clothes is guided by the karmic thoughts, words, and deeds, in which there is some kind of a notional hierarchy, right? Now, I think we are going beyond the realms of possibility. And so my approach is to say, listen, I understand the principles of karma. And I think even if I simply take the concept that there is cause and effect and that actions have consequences, and I live by that code in my life here and now, today, that's good enough for me without having to think that, oh, the suffering in my life comes from past karma, or everything that I'm doing, somebody is keeping some kind of a ledger somewhere, so many debits and so many credits. And then we are striving through life, pushing the stone uphill, and then the stone rolls back, and then you push it uphill again, and then it rolls back again. This seems like a kind of a slightly pointless thing to me. So again, as I said, when I think about karma, I think the concepts are really strong, valid, and actionable in our real life. I stop there. Whether or not it translates into reincarnation, and whether or not we are stuck in this unending cycle of samsara and suffering, right? I don't know. And so I would simply say it's possible. Very wise and very enlightened people have said it is true. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it's possible. But there are a lot of people who don't seem to believe in it at all, who have their own followings and who have their own theories. So that may also be possible. So who am I to basically jump in and say that, yes, this is true or this is not? I'll lead the life I've been given. Now, I will try and do as much good as possible, not because I want to earn karma in my next lifetime, but because I believe that doing good makes me feel good. and earns me a lot of goodwill that I enjoy in this life. That's good enough for me. So I'm a little more practical and here and now in this context. One other piece I want to add is that in my own healing journey, I have done a lot of work on myself using hypnosis and quantum healing and past life regressions. And I've read all the books and I know the stuff. And I never had any massive breakthroughs when I did all this past life regression and hypnosis and so on. One thing I'm sure of, and you may laugh at this, I know that in my past lives, I was not an Egyptian princess. The 7 out of 10 people who've done past life regression tell me they were an Egyptian priestess. I know that I was not that. In whatever past life regressions I've done, I've come across to myself as a very simple, ordinary peasant or fisherman or something like that. And there's been no crazy trauma or there's been no crazy things that have happened. So I don't know. Is it true? Is it not true? I don't know. My experience says question mark rather than exclamation mark.
Nice.
And I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. One of my other questions, then there were two parts to this, but I guess one part will not apply based on what you said. So forget about soul purpose. Let's talk about life purpose. Do you think there is a life purpose that one has to aspire to move towards, gravitate towards, or it's all random and go with the flow and you may or may not have a life purpose? So that's fine.
So my view on this is rather well defined because I do a lot of work in my coaching practice around this. So the way I look at it again is that I believe that all of us have a life purpose, but that life purpose is not given to us by somebody else. That life purpose arises or emerges from multiple factors of who we are, where we are born, how we are brought up, our experiences, our peers. So our life turns into being purposeful if we are smart about it. And then what I found in my own life and with many of the people I coach is that when that purpose starts to emerge and coalesce into something meaningful, it then feeds back. There's a kind of a feedback loop and it makes your day-to-day living that much sweeter and that much more fulfilling.
As compared to there being no life purpose.
As compared to simply going with the flow. Now, this is a personal experience, and this is also an experience of many people that I have worked with and talked to. And so, therefore, my view is that it's not something that, like, if you don't have a life purpose, then you're condemned to eternal damnation or something like that. I don't believe that. For somebody, the purpose may be to live life to the fullest and enjoy life to the fullest. There's nothing wrong with that if that's your purpose. And even when we do work related with purpose, we find that there are 5 or 6 broad areas of describing and defining purpose that people tend to fall into. All of them, in my view, are legitimate and valid because they are based upon the lives that each person has led up till now and the kind of life that person wants to lead going forward. So who am I to judge that if somebody is highly materialistic and highly consumerist and blows money up on this, that, and the other, and so on, or what in sometimes is called the Bhogi? Who am I to judge that a yogi purpose is better than a Bhogi purpose? I don't know. I have no idea. But if that brings that person joy and fulfillment in this life, then so be it. I'm not going to try and change that person's view. But I will say that to that person, if this is indeed your purpose and you are committed to this purpose, then good for you. Go for it. There may be pros to it, there may be cons to it. And again, actions have consequences. So as long as you keep that in mind, whichever purpose you choose to follow, I want to change the world. I have a reformer's type of a purpose. Or I want to understand the world. I have an investigator's type of a purpose. Or I simply want to enjoy the world. I have a enjoyment and enthusiastic type of a purpose. Or I want to consume life to the fullest. That's fine. Who is anyone to judge whether this is right, wrong, or otherwise? So again, my kind of middle of the road, sensible and practical kind of an approach to this is how I see it. But if you ask me to choose myself, I would rather live my life with a purpose. And I've worked very hard over the last 20 years to identify and discover and align and orient my life towards that purpose. And that gives me a lot of joy. And I know that if I did not do that, I would be less fulfilled and less happy.
Would you be able to give us a glimpse or share that life purpose with us?
So I would like to start with the vision of the world that I have, because my purpose must fit into the context of the world that I visualize or envision. So I envision a world free of suffering and full of joy. And if I want to make that world possible, then my purpose is to help people awaken, heal, grow, and thrive through life's transitions or life's adversities, big or small. That's my purpose. And what do I bring to that purpose? Clarity, creativity, care, and compassion. So that's the world I want, a world free of suffering and full of joy. What do I do in that world? I help people awaken, heal, grow, and thrive through life's transitions or adversities, big or small. And what gifts do I bring to make that happen? As I said, clarity, creativity, care, and courage. Now, if I lead my life and orient my life towards this, I feel a tremendous sense of authenticity in myself. This is me. This is what I bring. This is what I do. This is the kind of world that I wish to see. When you have faced cancer yourself, and like me, when I've worked with so many people dealing with cancer, death is in the room. And it's not a topic that most people are comfortable with, because we've been brought up in a modern culture, especially where death is feared and death is pushed away and death is denied, and we'll do shiv, don't talk like that, and all these kinds of things. Whereas what I noticed in my own journey and working with so many people is that unless we are comfortable with the concept of death and the topic of death internally and amongst each other, it's actually hard to live life to the fullest. So one of my mentors says, if you can die before you die, you can truly live.
Before you die.
And die before you die. So the die before you die is not a biological death. He's not saying you kill yourself or die before you die biologically. He's saying that there are aspects of you and your identity which deserve to die, which we cling, which we are attached to, which we carry with us for much longer than we need to. And therefore, if it's possible for you to identify what is that core identity of yourself and recognize that everything else that you're carrying is just stuff, baggage. And then if you're able to let go and let things die, things you fear, your attachments, your longings, even your grudges, right? Then you're able to actually live. So in our book, we talk about the fact that it's not actually death that we are most afraid of, it's loss. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a future, the loss of a plan, the loss of an ambition, the loss of a dream, right? Death is the biological event that occurs, but actually the issue is one of loss. And therefore, if we are able to take that and deal with that and accept that and internalize that and actually consciously let things go and die, you're creating the space for a lot more new stuff to come in. Now, you have had a medical example yourself of losing a very critical organ and including and integrating an entirely new organ. So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You could not have had two hearts, just like me with my cancer or me with my large intestine or me with so many aspects of myself. You said, for example, that now I have a broader perspective. So you've lost your narrow aperture in preference for a bigger aperture and a wider perspective. That served you then, but that's no longer serving you. So now you're a different person. This is fantastic. This is how we grow. So in the same way, I perfectly understand the idea that even our physical death may be thought of as simply casting away a sheath. Again, it's possible. And to say that the soul will then transmigrate and wear another set of clothes and come back in another set of lives and come back depending on your karma, will do this, that, and the other. I'm not even necessarily going there. I'm saying even when we think about life and death in our day-to-day life, for example, we know that all the cells in our body die and are reborn with certain frequency. And yet our identity remains the same. We know that the seasons change. There is death and rebirth happening continuously there. And yet the tree remains the same. But psychologically, emotionally, that's very hard for us to do consciously. Unless you get a whack on the side of the head like I got through my cancer or somebody else got through something else, then it forces us to look at this. For me, therefore, life is very precious and I want to live the best life I can for as long as I can. But I'm not going to let the fear of death come in the way of that. That is a big lesson for me from cancer.
I'd like to probe a little further just to understand your perspective when you talk about fear of death. So I remember that when I was going for my heart transplant operation. I was not anxious or worried that I would die on the operation table. If I died on the operation table, that's great, right? I got a nice anesthesia shot. I went out like very smooth. And then I just didn't come back. It was like I went to sleep and never came back. That's easy because then I don't have to deal with the next day and what's next. What I have always been concerned about and worried about, and I would use the word I fear, is that what if something happens and I am an invalid, I am suffering, I am going through pain and torture. That is what I'm like, I'd rather die, man. I'm not afraid of death. Please put me out in that situation. So I've always had this thing of being in a suffering state rather than death. Death is like problem solved. It's over.
Yeah.
Chapter closed.
Yeah. And many people are like you, but many people also, for example, I'm sure of thousands of people who keep their relatives alive, even though for all practical purposes, they would be better off dead.
Yeah, so that's worrying about other people.
But even individuals want to hang on. So we see all kinds. What I'm trying to say is that we see all kinds. But here and now, as we are living healthy and productive, are there not things that we can die to?
Shedding away concepts that we are hanging on to.
So again, I'm bringing it back into this life and saying that if I can try to die before I die, actually die, then maybe I'm creating the space for a different and a new and a fresh outlook and a fresh kind of life. And for me, given my work with cancer, I find that to be important insight for myself and something that I want to leave for others to think about as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What is it that you do? And if people want to reach out to you because they like what you said, how do they get in touch with you?
So, how to reach me is pretty simple. People can find me on social media and reach out to me, or they can reach me on my email ID, rootsandwings@gmail.com.
If you were to leave a message with whoever's watching this video, what would you like to say to them?
What is my message really? And the message is live, laugh, love, and lead from the inside out. I feel that if I can convey this message through my own life and through the legacy I leave behind in terms of my work and my children and people that I have worked with in my coaching practice or my clients and so on, then it will have contributed to that world which is free of suffering and full of joy. I think that's the secret sauce.